my 30F husband, 32M, and I thought we had a perfect marriage. Until I found out he was hiding a family he didn't know about. Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest because my life has taken a turn that I never saw coming. I, 30F, have been married to my husband, Nick, 32M, for 6 years. We've known each other since college, where we met through mutual friends, and we've been inseparable ever since. I've always thought of our relationship as one of those rare, truly honest ones. No secrets, no skeletons in the closet. But I guess I was wrong. So wrong. It all started about 3 months ago. Nick and I have been saving up to buy our first home, and we've been staying with his dad while we search for a place. Nick's dad, Tom, 58M, is retired, living alone since Nick's mom passed away about a decade ago. He's always been kind of a loner, but he's also been good to me, treating me like the daughter he never had. One afternoon, I was organizing some old boxes in the attic. Tom had asked me to help sort through some stuff that had been gathering dust for years. It seemed like a good way to kill time while we were house hunting. Most of it was old furniture, holiday decorations, and a bunch of photo albums that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. That's when I found the first piece of the puzzle. Inside one of the photo albums was a stack of letters. Old, yellowed with age, tied together with a red ribbon. The handwriting on the outside wasn't familiar to me, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened them. They were love letters, written from a woman named Karen to Tom. The dates on the letters spanned several years, starting in the early 90s. They were full of all kinds of intimate details, inside jokes, declarations of love, and a lot of talk about how they couldn't wait to be together openly someday. There were even a few references to a child, our little angel, but the letters were vague, and I wasn't sure what they meant. At first, I thought maybe it was just some old fling Tom had before he met Nick's mom. But as I read on, I found a letter that changed everything. It was dated just a few months before Nick was born, and it talked about Karen being pregnant, about how she didn't know if she could go through with the plan to give up the baby. It seemed like Karen wanted to keep the child, but Tom was pushing her to do something else. The letter ended abruptly, like she hadn't been able to finish her thoughts. I confronted Tom about the letters that night when Nick was out with friends. I didn't want to start drama or stir up old memories, but I couldn't get the idea out of my head. I needed to know if this Karen and the baby she mentioned had anything to do with Nick. Tom's reaction caught me off guard. He turned pale and started shaking. I'd never seen him look like that before. He's usually this gruff, no-nonsense guy, but in that moment he looked terrified. He took the letters from me with shaking hands, saying he'd thought he'd gotten rid of them years ago. Then he sat down heavily in his armchair and told me the truth. According to Tom, Karen was a woman he had an affair with around the time Nick's mom was pregnant. It was a long, messy story. Apparently, Tom and Karen had been seeing each other for years, even before he got married. When Karen got pregnant, Tom wanted her to handle it discreetly, but she refused. They argued about it, and eventually, she decided to cut ties with him. Tom never knew what became of her or the baby. He said he tried to find out at first, but then life got busy. Nick was born, he had a family to take care of, and he just let it go. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that Nick's dad had hidden something like this for so long. I asked him if he thought Nick had a sibling out there somewhere, but he just shook his head and said it was impossible to know for sure. He swore he never heard from Karen again and that she might have put the baby up for adoption, or she might have raised it herself. He didn't know. I didn't know what to do with the information. Should I tell Nick? Should I leave it alone? I didn't even know how to process it myself. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, I got a message on Facebook from a woman named Elena, 29F. She said she was looking for information about her birth parents and that she thought I might be able to help her. I asked her how she found me, and she told me that she'd done a DNA test a few months ago, hoping to find relatives. The test had matched her with someone related to Tom, one of Nick's cousins, apparently, and she'd done some digging, trying to figure out who her father might be. When she came across my profile and saw photos of Tom, she said the resemblance was unmistakable. She thought that Tom might be her father, but she wasn't sure and wanted my help. I felt like the world was spinning. I agreed to meet with Elena, even though I had no idea what I'd say to her. I figured I needed to at least hear her out before I said anything to Nick. When we met, she showed me a photo of her mother, Karen. It was an old, faded picture, but there was no mistaking the resemblance to the photos I'd seen in Tom's letters. Elena told me that Karen had passed away years ago from cancer, but before she died, she'd hinted that Elena's father was someone who wasn't ready for her. Elena had always wondered about her dad, and when the DNA test led her to Tom's family, she finally felt like she was getting answers. My mind was racing, trying to connect all the dots. If what Elena said was true, then Nick had a half-sister he didn't know about. I didn't know how he'd take the news, and I was scared of how it might change everything. But I couldn't keep it from him, not after everything I'd learned. So I decided to tell him the truth. I told Nick everything about finding the letters, about my conversation with his dad, and about meeting Elena. At first, he was completely silent, just staring at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then he got angry, angrier than I'd ever seen him before. He said I had no right to go digging through his family's past without telling him, that I'd betrayed his trust by keeping it from him for even a few days. He didn't seem to care about the fact that he might have a sister. All he could focus on was that I hadn't told him right away. We had our biggest fight that night, and he stormed out, saying he needed space to think. He stayed at a friend's place for a few days, and I barely heard from him. It was like everything in our marriage was unraveling. I tried to give him the space he asked for, but inside, I was breaking. I kept wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake by getting involved in all of this. Maybe I should have just left the past buried. But then a week later, he came back. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days, but he was calmer. He said he'd talked to his dad, and Tom had confirmed everything. He admitted that he didn't know what to do with the information, that he felt like his whole life had been a lie, but that he didn't blame me for what happened. He apologized for the way he reacted, and he asked if I'd go with him to meet Elena. We met Elena at a cafe, and the whole thing felt surreal. She and Nick just stared at each other for what felt like ages, trying to see themselves in each other's faces. Elena told him about Karen, about the stories she'd heard growing up, and Nick told her about his childhood, about the father he thought he knew. It was awkward and tense, but there were also moments where I saw hope in their eyes, like maybe this wasn't just a loss. Maybe it was a chance for something new. But even as they tried to bond, more questions kept coming up. Elena wanted to know why Tom had never reached out, why he'd abandoned Karen when she needed him most. Nick demanded answers from his dad, and Tom broke down, admitting that he'd been a coward, that he'd made mistakes he couldn't take back. It felt like our whole world was being rebuilt on shaky ground, like every truth we thought we knew was being questioned. Now, we're in this strange, uncertain place. Elena has become a part of our lives. She's trying to get to know Nick, and she's even invited us to meet her husband and young son. Nick is trying to process what it means to have a sister, but I can see the pain in his eyes when he thinks about everything he missed out on. And as for me, I'm just trying to keep us all together, to find some kind of normal in the midst of all this chaos. I keep wondering if I made a mistake by digging into the past, if I should have just left it alone. But then I see the way Nick and Elena look at each other, like they're trying to find pieces of themselves in a stranger. And I wonder if maybe some things were meant to come to light. I don't know if our marriage will ever be the same, or if we can ever fully forgive Tom for the secrets he kept. But I'm trying to hope that there's a way forward, one where we can build something new out of the wreckage. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm trying to take it one step at a time. If anyone has any advice on how to navigate this, I could really use it. TLDR. Found old letters suggesting that my husband's dad had an affair and possibly a child years ago. After digging deeper, discover my husband has a half-sister he never knew about. It's torn apart our relationship, but now we're trying to navigate this new reality and see if we can rebuild something together.